So, today's topic is going to be a discussion about the Southern Cage and how it encompasses lynching, policing a community without a trial. Basically, in the South, lynching was done as a form of punishment within the community. It wasn't something that was taken care of federal or with public authority in it. We also are going to talk about how this action during the FDR administration, how the president doesn't act within this movement, how that has an effect on it, and just total policing of the Black community and how white Southerners, the politician, had a say-so in how this bill was passed. So we understand that Franklin D. Roosevelt was made aware of the anti-lynching bill, and he was also aware of the impact that lynching had on the nation and its effect on its citizens, but he refused to do anything about it. He was most notably known to quote that he can't risk it. And this is due to him wanting to basically not risk it by upsetting people in the South who would contribute greatly into his reelection campaign. So he didn't want to make any he didn't want to involve himself in these things because he felt like it would be detrimental to his reelection. We also understand that the First Lady, Eleanor Roosevelt, was a advocate of the anti-lynching bill, and she also had discussions and tried to collaborate with Walter White, who at the time was the president of the NAACP, and basically wrote a letter in response to Mr. White and how she did her best into talking to the president about this issue and how he wasn't budging. And, she basically reiterated how she thinks that the anti-lynching bill would be a great step forward in how the nation handles and look at lynching. But unfortunately, there was only so much that she can do as far as her powers. They were limited in the White House, and she suggested that the president of the NAACP, Walter White, speak with other prominent members in the Senate. But we also understand that according to articles, most notably the article from Source 4 in New York Times in April 1935, how the Senate was basically having a conversation and about the Costigan-Wagner anti-lynching bill, and how it basically was at a filibuster, which is a standstill in regards to the voting of this bill. Looking at the article, I got to see how there was a lot of discussions, but no voting. There was a speaker, Brian, who had full cooperation of the bill, but from the article, there was a lot of speeches, really a lot of adjournment to vote down the motion. We understand from the article that the anti-lynching bill was listed on the must list of an important topic that the Senate had to come to a decision about. But we see that there were long talks before the actual filibuster. Pretty much everyone wanted to give a speech about how they felt about the lynching bill. But according to the article, no one really talked directly in how the bill will affect the nation as a whole. It was a lot of running around it, and this have a lot to do with the Southern politicians. I think that contributes a lot to the Southern cage, the idea of the Southern cage, because um, citizens in the South, slavery was a big issue. Um, and we come to realize that even after the Civil War, where slavery was an issue, even after Reconstruction, we see that there are Southern citizens that are still making an effort to prohibit any advancement of any Black Americans. And we see that not only in community policing of Blacks, but we also see that in federal and judicial branches of the government. There is also a call from the NAACP on a pamphlet that was circulated, which was an anti-lynching pamphlet. It was produced by the NAACP. We come to see that lynching, in the pamphlet, there is a picture of there was a picture of a lynching of a man. We also see in this picture that the lynching was regarded as an event within communities. There is a crowd that is around the victim, and there are also children present. And we see that based on this pamphlet that was produced by the NAACP, it calls to inform members that because of this event, we see that this is really, really serious. And not only are we informed of this, this is the norm. We have to do something about it. And this becomes so much of a norm that we can have pictures of this and we know that this is happening, but there's not enough action behind the movement to make a change. So this pamphlet is showing in black and white images of how this victim is being lynched. There's a crowd, and the crowd also includes children, and specifically white children. And there is a child that's within the crowd that has a smile or a smirk on their face. And this leads the question to readers of the pamphlet about how these children will grow up and what type of citizens they will be based on what they're seeing right now. So it also states within the pamphlet that the Costigan-Wagner anti-lynching bill is once again within Senate. And this is not the first time that this bill has been brought onto the Senate floor. It also states the filibuster was bought one time in 1935 and then again in 1938. So it was just a call for action for members of the NAACP to just get involved, to donate, to talk to members of the community, to talk to prominent members of the media, and just really get it out there that this bill has to be passed, because look what is happening in the communities that is using lynching as a form of policing, really unconstitutionally. So I think that that's important to how the anti-lynching pamphlet is circulating around, and also how it gives people an idea of how victims of the South, more specifically Black Americans, how they are within this Southern cage. So, of course, they don't have the same freedoms as the other citizens of America, but they're also victims to laws that are set by white supremacy. So even if they felt, if it was just a feeling that the law, that a Black American broke the law, or it was just an unspoken rule, white people in the South, white Southerners, felt that they were justified in doing these things to Black Americans because they felt like that was the way it should be. So we also can refer to our other source, which is a article listed in Brownsville, Texas, and it talks about how there was a victim, Bill Rohn, who was a victim of this crime pretty much because he worked on a farm and he didn't have any food, and he knocked on the door asking for food. And the white woman who answered the door was pretty much shocked and just frightened by this Black man that he ran off. So in her recantment of the story, a mob, and by word of mouth, a mob or a posse came together to seek Bill, because in the community, if a Black American, especially a Black American man, if a white woman feels threatened by a Black American man in any type of way, white men feel it is their duty to make the Black man pay for making their white women feel uncomfortable in any regard. So in this situation, word of mouth spread. There was a posse, a mob, in other words, they went after this man, and they couldn't find him. And according to this article, there is a deputy sheriff who basically was in charge of the members of this mob, basically giving them instruction to scatter and spread apart so they can break their numbers up in order to find Bill, because clearly they weren't able to find him in a few days. So this sheriff, this member of authority in law enforcement, is basically giving the okay to community members that this is the way that we should handle it. And so the crime was just a Black man asking for food. Unfortunately, it led into a white woman being frightened, which resulted in a mob coming after him, which resulted ultimately into lynching. And this further adds to the idea of the Southern cage, because not only are Black Americans limited to what they can do in as far as like how they're living, you have people in the community, law enforcement, who you should feel safe with, who you will count on to make members of the community feel safe, contributing to lynching, contributing to the community policing, even though the rules and the laws that's set within the community is based on white supremacy. So it's unfair for Black Americans all around. And this leads to everything coming together of the Southern cage. So when it comes to victims of lynching, when it comes to organizations coming together to end lynching, when it comes to the community and how law enforcement and how members of white society, mostly white supremacy, is doing these things to basically prohibit motion and advancement. And we see this graduating into the level of Senate, and we also see it graduating to another level to where the First Lady is even advocating on behalf of the Black community in the NAACP, saying, hey, this is something that we need to pay attention to, that needs to change. And the president at the time is saying that this is something that he can't risk, all because he doesn't want to upset members who voters who are going to contribute to his reelection campaign. And the idea in conclusion of the Southern Cage is an all-encompassing theme, and how, in a sense, the South pretty much contributing to limitations when it comes to Black Americans progressing during this time. And it took a lot of people, and it took a lot of call for actions from citizens, members of the communities, and unfortunately those victims that that were affected by lynching, to make a change. And considering that anti-lynching bill was fully ended by President Biden around 3 years ago, and it's 2023 now, really says a lot about how white supremacy is still prevalent in our nation. And it also speaks to the effort that everyone had to endure in order to make this change when it comes to lynching. Even though